Welcome, stereotypical Italian mothers, to Geek Salad's retro movie reviews from the Geek Salad podcast. I'm Andy.
She was Greek, and I'm Mike.
Was she Greek?
She was Greek.
God damn it. We were just talking about this. We were just talking about things that just, like, I knew that. Yeah, tonight we wrap up our look at horror movies of the 1970s with an all-time classic that Mike and I knew was such a big movie, we cannot do it alone. So, who do we bring in to help us demystify pagan demons? But our good friends, Derek and Laurel from the Midnight Myth podcast. Welcome back, guys. It's been a while.
Yes. Thank you for having us. Glad to be here. Really excited to talk about this movie with you both.
Yeah. As soon as we decided to do 70s horrors and The Exorcist, I was like, we need to get Midnight Myth on this one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so let me ask you a question. So first of all, I'm assuming at some point this week you watched it, or was this just kind of it running up? Did you watch the original cut or the director's cut?
I am fairly certain we watched the original cut because there was no spider walk. It's the director's cut that has the spider walk, right?
Yeah. I watched it on Max. There was no spider walk.
Same here.
Same.
All right. Makes sense. I have seen the spider walk before. I had never seen The Exorcist until like 15 years ago. And we got it through Netflix back when Netflix used to do DVDs. And that had the spider walk.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So what's the spider walk? I just don't think I know.
So it's when Reagan goes down the stairs like ding, 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 ding on her fingers. Yeah, it's really creepy, but it's cut from the theatrical version. Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, it does nothing to advance the story, but it's a cool visual.
Yeah.
And it's just, I think like her mother is talking with somebody and it just happens. And I think it happens prior to her being like strapped into the bed and everything.
Yeah, that's why I think I read that Friedkin cut it like fairly late in the process. And Blatley absolutely wanted it in there, but Friedkin was like, it's too early. It shouldn't be in there. So.
Yeah.
Blatty got his revenge. He got to write and direct Exorcist 3.
Yeah. Oh, God. Man, there were so many disagreements between them. It's really funny.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So let's talk about this. So first of all, this movie is, for the film historians out there, the first horror movie, the first like pure horror movie to be nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, also might be the first pure horror movie to win a screenplay Oscar.
Probably.
I know it was nominated.
It was William Peter Blatty won.
He did win. And it won the Golden Globe too, right? Yeah.
No idea. So I have a confession to make about this movie.
Yes.
We were excited to do it. Couldn't wait to do it. I'm like, The Exorcist, all-time great horror movie. Love to talk about it. The movie comes on and it starts in the Middle East. And I go to Laurel and I'm like, funny, I didn't remember that it started in the Middle East. Then as it's going on, I'm like, hold on, the mother's an actor? I don't remember that. Then I'm like, wait, who's that guy? She's like, well, that's the priest that's going to do The Exorcist. We pause the movie and she looks at me and she goes, have you ever seen this movie before? And I said, I don't think I have, actually.
Which was like such a treat too. Like I remember realizing that and being like, oh my God, I'm so excited for you to get to watch this for the first time and to get to like watch you react to it for the first time. And I was like, hey, watch the range hood in this scene, like watch out for the subliminal messaging in this one. It's fun.
Well, and it speaks to how prolific this movie is that I had convinced myself that I had watched it, even though I had never seen the movie before, because the scenes are so iconic. And, I got a tattoo today, my tattoo artist, and we're like, I probably see like lists of top horror movies, a YouTube channel breaking down the great horror cinema of the 70s. And so like, I'm familiar with all the beats of the story. I've seen all of the main images. I could quote lines from it, but I never actually sat down and watched the thing.
That is really interesting because, like, we were talking about The Omen last week. I was kind of like me with The Omen. I'd seen bits and pieces, but I'd never seen it from start to finish. And Kurt, to your point, yes, I believe this is the very first Best Picture nominee to get people to faint in the audience, which is pretty cool.
All the movie theater bathrooms with vomit. Yep.
Yeah. It's interesting too because first of all, Derek, I'm so happy you finally did get to watch it. I watched this with my 15-year-old, and she was like, she likes this style of horror. She likes a lot of the tell don't show aspect of horror. I mean, she audibly was shouting, "Oh my God!" during the crucifix scene.
Yeah.
But she genuinely liked it because there's a lot of questions that you have to ask about the mechanics of how, and then you go on, you use your favorite search engine and you look to see how did this happen, why did this happen, and it all comes down to one thing, and that's Parker Brothers has the keys to the spirit realm.
Yep. The Ouija board, Cat and Howdy.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And William Friedkin had no problem maiming and hurting their actors in any way possible to get the shots.
Oh,
Really?
Yeah.
the 70s was a lawless time.
And Ellen Burstyn and Linda Blair ended up having like lifelong injuries and medical issues based on the like acrobatic stunts that they were doing.
Oh, that makes me like the movie a little less.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the scene where Regan like throws her mother against the wall. Ellen Burstyn actually broke her coccyx in that scene, in that shot actually, because Friedkin told the stunt performer to yank her back as hard as he possibly could.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. This is Kubrickian in terms of the abuse that these actors took. And Linda
actually,
Blair,
two of the
had injuries from that,
actually,
like that constantly being slammed up and down.
She developed scoliosis.
Yeah. I know there has been kind of a myth of a curse around this movie because the woman that played Damien's mother died shortly after filming her scenes in this one. Mm-hmm. The actor that played the director, that Regan's first victim, he died shortly after filming his scenes in this one. There were a number of related deaths or injuries compared to this one, but whether or not there's an actual curse.
Right. We all know there's only one movie curse, and it's the Poltergeist curse.
Some people do think that Friedkin was kind of drumming that up so that he could get some more PR for the movie. But it was such a like sense of the supernatural interference on the horrible things that kept happening on this movie that they called in a priest and almost had him perform an exorcism on set. But they thought that the cast and crew would be so freaked out by an exorcism that the priest just went in and was like, I bless you.
Yeah, exactly. Dominus ominous. Yeah, no, and Kurt brought up that Friedkin also shot a gun near Jason Miller's ear to make him startled. It's like, I'm an actor, right? I can just do that.
In that final scene when Father Dyer is doing the last rites to Father Karras, Friedkin didn't think that Dyer was getting the emotional resonance there, so he walked up and slapped him right across the face.
Ooh.
Yep. And then did the scene.
Yep.
It is a beautiful scene.
It is.
I'm not condoning that.
Yeah, I'm not
condoning way, shape, or form.
Yes,
but
it is. And Friedkin has directed two of my favorite movies ever. This and The French Connection.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'll cut him some slack. Kind of like people cut Kubrick slack over all the abuse that he put Shelley Duvall through. I don't even care about anybody else, but what he did to Shelley Duvall on the set of The Shining is just not right. I think it messed her up forever.
Yeah.
But so with that said, guys, because I know, Mike, is this your first time watching it or
second time? I did watch it like back in the late college days. For me, I was on a kind of a classic movie kick, and I did watch this one at that point.
Okay.
I actually thought it would be scarier than it ended up being.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that the actual exorcism is only the last like 20-25 minutes of the movie. There was a lot of build up to that.
Yeah. That's how they used to do it back then. They slow cooked back then. So we know now that, Derek, you've seen this for the very first time. Laurel, how about you? When was the first time you watched this one?
Yeah, so this one I saw pretty young. I was probably about Reagan's age. I must have been like 13 or 14 when I saw this movie.
Just like when I saw Halloween, I was way too young when I
Yeah,
watched Halloween.
this is a trend for me that you'll find. I saw a lot of movies way too young. And honestly, when I saw it for the first time, did not find it terribly scary. And I think that was because I didn't have super sophisticated horror tastes at that point and was not really primed for the slow burn and the unsettling atmosphere that it creates. The things that really did freak me out were the Pazuzu faces and the subliminal imaging. Like that really stuck.
Yeah.
And I realized watching it again, this was only the second time I had actually sat through and watched the whole thing. I realized how much of this movie is just like burned on my memory. I was like, I can't believe I remember this so well from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But truly found a new appreciation for it this time, especially in terms of, you mentioned there's this tell, don't show aspect, which feels like you're breaking the first law of cinema. But at the same time, it's so much more unsettling and so much more terrifying to be like, well, did you know when he fell, his head was turned all the way back around, to say that to us well after we find out that Burke Dennings has died, instead of showing us his mutilated corpse. Like that is so much more scary because it leaves so much more to the imagination. And then you juxtapose that with shocking, like overtly shocking scenes like the crucifix scene.
Yeah.
That just feels like a super recipe for awesome stick with you horror. So I really loved rewatching it. And
I love this movie. I mean, I've only seen this movie twice, but I truly love this movie because, you know, Laurel, to your point, there are things about it that stick with you. And I feel like I'm not a big blood and guts horror person, but horror like this, that does, it sticks to your bones type of horror, I appreciate so much more because it's doing its job. It's making me think about it. You know, I remember, you know, and Mike, maybe we'll cover this when we cover the horror movies of the 1990s, but I remember watching the Blair Witch Project and being kind of like, walking out of there like, all right, it was a movie. And I was driving home. My friend and I were going to stop and get some lunch. And then that last shot flashed back into my mind. And I'm just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And that point made all the sense in the world and redeemed that entire movie. And with The Exorcist, it's a lot of just that. I keep in my brain hearing that low, you know, angry gurgle that Regan had when she was like almost fully possessed.
Yeah.
Love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you also, like, considering how much Tubular Bells is associated with this movie, you really only hear it once.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit at the end.
Yeah. And not composed for the movie too. It was unearthed from these music archives. Yeah, it's just iconic.
Yeah. I actually just watched a video on that recently. One of the YouTube channels I follow, Todd in the Shadows, did a one-hit wonderland on Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells.
Nice.
And the song itself is like the side of an LP. And the singles version, the one that they released that actually got radio play, was shortened, but it wasn't the cut Mike Oldfield wanted.
Yeah.
So he released the Mike Oldfield Tubular Bells single, which was the back end of the song that sounds nothing like Tubular Bells, and all what we associate to be Tubular Bells.
Yeah.
But you're right, Mike. There's very little instance of it. It doesn't even come up at the opening. You know, Warner Brothers Pictures presents The Exorcist. They don't do any of that. It's when Chris is walking
home
from one place to another.
Yeah.
So, which if you haven't bought Mike Oldfield's album,
one thing
like prog rock. Yeah, absolutely. You know what? Here is a really funny tidbit about Mike Oldfield that I'm going to blow your minds with, because I just learned this.
Do it.
The Hall & Oates song "Family Man." Okay, if you're familiar with that, I believe it's on the H2O album, written by Mike Oldfield.
Wow.
That's why. And go now. You're gonna go back and listen to it.
We need to put that into our bank as like
Yeah,
people.
put that in your bank because it sounds so different than most Hall & Oates songs at that time. Back when they were like super pop, every song was a number one song.
Right.
So yeah, it was. I was just like, whoa, that can't be.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
what
but
were you gonna say,
the
Derek?
funny thing, Derek, you mentioned the Egypt scene earlier. That you didn't have any memory of that for obvious reasons that have now become apparent.
Mm-hmm.
Mike brought that up to me today, or was it today or yesterday?
No, yesterday.
Yesterday.
I'd actually started watching Exorcist on my phone at work because it was quiet time, and just watching that scene, I texted Andy.
Quiet time.
He's having his executive time.
But I texted Andy. I'm like, this scene could have easily been cut from the movie. It really doesn't further anything, but at the same time, the movie is better for having it in it. It's really, really a weird scene.
Yeah.
So I have tons of thoughts about it. So my first time watching it, I'll just say I thought it was a horror masterpiece, and like for a horror movie, as close to a perfect movie as you could possibly get. Huge fan of it.
Yeah.
One of the things I loved about it is that it juxtaposes both the ancient, medieval, and modern. And it does so in both visual storytelling and through character. So starting in the Iraq, in the ancient world, that'd be called the ancient Near East. So starting in the ancient Near East, which is now the modern day Middle East, and unearthing ancient artifacts, to me, like is a clear visual symbol of this evil being incredibly, incredibly old. And Westerners going to want to unearth these things and mess with these powers they don't understand is bringing the buried back to life, what should have stayed buried. Then when we get to when we were in America, so many of the shots are framed to have the church and the college right next to each other.
Yeah.
Similarly, the college institution, the institution of higher learning, of modern knowledge, of scholarship, right next to these medieval style churches. It is the medieval era that we get the fleshed out Roman Catholic Church. Then when we have, her perceived illness, all legitimate scientific avenues get pursued, and they take time to show us every single scientific avenue. And the first mention of an exorcism is, hey, she's psychologically ill, so let's trick her with an exorcism, right? And it's almost like this nod being like, we can't tell you that your daughter's possessed, but we can tell her that we can trick her because sometimes, the old ways still linger on here. And so I love how it took its time very slowly to develop that theme of the ancient to the medieval to the modern. And that to me was something that I'm like, man, I've never seen a horror movie do that. At the same time, there's some serious issues there. Not with the storytelling, the script, the cinematography, freaking perfect. The issue there is choosing Iraq as the seat of that, and to describe the unearthing of the ancient evil as an inherently Islamic thing. And that to me felt a little off when, because it made it seem like this is potentially could be seen as this is an Islamic evil that we need the Catholic good to then fight.
Yeah.
This demon is supposed to be pre-Islamic. It's supposed to convey that. But if you're not savvy in this, there's a real risk of this movie being so pro-Catholic and so anti-Islam that's like, ooh, is there a little Islamophobia? Like, and it's not like an overt Islamophobia, like the movie Kingdom of Heaven is an Islamic phobic movie, right? Like, so it's not like overtly Islamophobic, but there's this little subtlety to how it tells that ancient medieval to modern makes me pause and be like, ooh, you're being a little Orientalist here,
Yeah, at the very least, if it's not Islamophobic overtly, then it is absolutely Orientalist. And I just wanted to mention also, you mentioned the translation of ancient to medieval to modern. The entire rite of exorcism carries these medieval associations. They say it dies out in the 16th century, which is the Renaissance. So it's something that's very much associated with this superstitious, quote unquote, dark age past. So that's, I think, excellent analysis. And I could talk a little bit about Pazuzu if anybody wants to hear.
I'd love to hear. I was waiting for one of you to bring it up.
Yeah, I'm also repping like the most demonic shirt that I could find was my As Above. So,
All I've got is this.
yeah, got plenty.
Yeah,
of
I'm just wearing my Jackie Daytona shirt.
I've got a skull on my shirt. So
regular
Excellent.
human,
Yeah.
human bartender.
Regular human bartender from Arizona.
Yes. So yeah, as most people know now, the demon that has taken possession of Reagan is a Mesopotamian entity called Pazuzu that is never explicitly stated within the movie, but it is in the book, and then it is later explicitly stated in the franchise. And there is enough, there is enough of the iconography being intertwined to assume that who has taken over Reagan. And the first time we see him in the movie is when the little token is unearthed in the shrine or the site at Nineveh. And then we later see a full-size, probably life-size statue of Pazuzu that is juxtaposed with Lancaster Marin, Father Marin. And then we see it again in Reagan's room while the exorcism is being performed. So Pazuzu was an ancient Mesopotamian deity, demon. One thing to keep in mind as you consider the definition of demon is that most ancient religions are not as dualistic as something like Christianity. So demon and God don't necessarily have the same black and white associations that we might ascribe to them. So Pazuzu was a figure, he's represented pretty well in the movies as he's usually depicted. Dog-faced usually, or lion-faced, has two sets of wings, usually has his hands in kind of this position, one pointing up, I'm mirrored, one pointing up and one pointing down, as above, so below. He has like eagle's feet and a big old snake penis. As
you do.
Oh,
Yep.
sure.
As one does in these times.
Yeah.
Looking good. And he is characterized as a personification or as the demon or god of the southwestern wind. This was the wind that would blow through these Mesopotamian civilizations. There's some debate whether he is a Sumerian in origin character or Assyrian in origin. There's some space and changing hands of empires between those two things, but in that basic locale. So the southwestern wind would bring storms, would bring plagues. So generally, if you associate Pazuzu with that southwestern wind, you don't want to be on his bad side. So for that reason, Pazuzu becomes a protective entity who is invoked in white magic ceremony or by carrying tokens of him or creating little statuettes of him that you would keep in your house. So he ends up being kind of a household spirit that people cling to and ask for the protection of. Mm-hmm. Also, which I think is interestingly connected with this movie, he is considered a protector of mothers and children, especially nursing mothers, childbirth, things associated with, the mother-baby connection. Usually that's because he has this other deity in the mythology associated with him who is a baby eater. She's called Lamashtu, and she likes to steal babies and eat them. So whether he's actually someone who cares deeply about the welfare of mothers and babies or someone who just wants to stick it to his rival is up for debate. But I think that's really interesting to see that in connection with a story about a single mother trying to save her daughter from this influence. It feels almost incongruous, but just fascinating. Yeah. I do like to think that maybe Pazuzu blew in through the wind on that open window, the southwestern wind that might have been blowing through Georgetown. But certainly there is a great deal of ambiguity about him. He's unimaginably ancient and much, much older than the Christian religions, much older than any of the Abrahamic religions. So really interesting choice to bring him into this kind of dualistic space. And I think as someone watching it with a perspective like ours, we're just waiting for him to break out of that dualistic space. But it works, interestingly enough in the movie.
Yeah. One of the meta criticisms I have of demon possession movies, which The Exorcist is certainly part of that sort of subgenre of horror, is that it exploits the pagan past as monstrous and demonic.
Right.
So like you learn about this guy and like he's just not a bad demon, right? This is not someone that haunts people and hurts them. Like any ancient pagan deity, you catch them on a bad day and it's not going to be good, right?
Right.
You thumb your eye at them and think, oh, I'm as good as or better than this spirit. Well, they're going to make you pay and take you down a peg. But if you give them the right rituals and blessings, they're also going to protect you and get you where you need to go. Mm-hmm. And in so many movies, they dig into the pagan past and they create it as demonic, as possession. And there's a really good reason for that, because doing that is really, really, really old. We got to thank the Romans for that. Really, really huge broad brush of very complicated history. When the Roman religion, when the Romans, Constantine the emperor, decriminalized Christianity and formed what would become the Roman Catholic Church, the pagan religions were not outlawed. They existed simultaneously. And Constantine was a cautious man. He spent his entire life doing Christian things and pagan things. Then on his deathbed, he converts to Christianity. But once the Roman imperial state religion became the Christian religion, while the pagan was still there, they came up with a long propaganda program to depaganize the Roman peasantry. And so they would do things like, okay, so you're going to go to someone and say, I want you to stop worshiping Jupiter. I want you to start worshiping Jesus Christ. So what do? You make Jesus Christ look like Jupiter. That's why Jesus Christ has the long beard and everything. But what you say is like, hey, listen, you could go worship Jupiter. You could go do these rites. You might get what you want from Jupiter, but you're doing demon worship. You're worshiping demons. These people fought against God. But if you go to our church and you worship there, now you're going to get to heaven. Jupiter won't give you heaven. You don't get heaven from Jupiter. You get heaven from the one true God. You do things like an illiterate peasantry class would go to like a saint altar and they would worship about that saint, or to a pagan altar and they'd worship to that. You just take down that statue and you put a saint there. 3 generations later, when you have an illiterate, population, they're just worshiping at the saint altar, not the pagan altar. So there was huge, it took a long time when the Roman Catholic Church was there before it made paganism illegal. So they existed side by side. So they had to create a propaganda apparatus to scare people out of paganism and into Christianity and to convert, right? So it was a very top-down approach, which is why I come back to why they start in the Middle East. It's like they should have started somewhere in Rome or Greece, to me. It's still just as ancient, but the fact that and like that's where this sort of discourse was happening. Are you engaged? Are these real gods? Are they demons? What do they exist? Like you literally have records of clerics being like, what do we do with the pagan gods? We can't deny that they're real because people have been worshiping them and getting what they want from them. So obviously they're real. So we can't say they're not real. So what do? We have to create a cosmology that accounts for them. And that's where demons really come from in Christianity. So it would have been, to me, now this is obviously a history mythology nerd's perspective. So keep that in a grain of salt. Like that's a freaking amazing movie. But I would have liked to have seen it start in the ancient West, right? And that this was an ancient Western deity rather than the ancient Near East, because they've otherized it. When like, hey, let's just own this as a movie about Western theology, Western discourse, Western mythology, the ancient West, the ancient medieval, like I would have liked that more rather than stacking the ancient Near East on there to be like, that's where the real evil comes from.
Derek, how often do you think about the Roman Empire?
Every damn day. Sadly, for a long time.
That's, you know what? It's okay because you were a genuine lover of the history of the Roman Empire and not like whatever that ridiculous
TikTok trend
bullshit that's going around right now with it.
Someone asked me once, hey, was that a good Roman emperor? And I'm like, you got to understand, every single Roman emperor would slaughter an innocent child if it kept them in power for another. Like, good is like, as we know it, that doesn't apply then.
Kind of going off of that point of like starting in the Middle East, though, one thing I did like about that, though, is the fact that Father Marin never seemed like anti-Muslim at all. He actually seemed to be working and cooperating very well with them.
Worked
Had that one moment where they were all praying towards Mecca. He was just walking behind them very respectfully, not getting in the way. So it definitely kind of points out Father Marin he definitely kind of works on outside in the fringes of the Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they
I
mentioned that
agree.
he also performed an exorcism in Africa, his most recent one. So you certainly get the sense that he is worldly, if nothing else.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very interesting to see his Catholicism living side by side with these ancient cultures that carry a pagan past and then an Islamic present.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Mike. That I don't think if there's any negativity there, it's not an intentional. We're trying, and for me, it's more of like a subtle criticism, rather than hitting it on the head, like, oh, you got this so wrong,
Right.
Some subtlety to it, being like, could this potentially be internalized by some as anti-Islamic? I don't think the people making it are thinking, well, we hate the people of Islam and want to generate. Like, I don't think that's happening. I think they specifically go out of their way to do the opposite of that.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, too, with the casting of Max von Sydow as the old priest, he was like 43 years old.
Oh, was he really?
He was born in like the 30s. So he was in his early to mid 40s. And I mean, the aging prosthetics look like aging prosthetics, here, wrinkles here, you're all set.
Yeah.
But what I liked about this, and this is, coming from somebody who grew up in the Catholic Church, is, first of all, just watching these priests be human beings. You had mentioned that, with, I have the names here just because I'm just terrible at remembering anybody's names. Father Marin has this extra life that isn't just dedicated to prayer and worship. Father Karras is a deeply flawed,
super troubled
person.
Yeah.
They're really, what I liked about this was it didn't feel like there was any point, any of them, like the church higher ups, there wasn't any sanctimony to them. They were all very, they're following, what they need to follow. But watching Father Karras, smoke and drink and, kind of do all these other things. He's in the gym, he's, working the bag, he's exercising. And his job isn't really, he's delivering mass, but he's also a psychologist, and the church paid him to go out and get your education in psychology. And a lot of that is great because that removes a lot of the tropes that we would see in the 1970s and 80s when it comes to religious figures.
Totally agree.
Absolutely.
And it's really easy for a movie like this to have the moral is like, you modern people in your modern ways, you got to go back into church and pray. And that's not really the message that I get from this movie. The message I get from this movie is that the ancient and the modern and the medieval all kind of can still overlap and coexist.
Yeah.
Like the fact that, like you mentioned, a psychologist and a priest, and he doesn't, even as he starts investigating the exorcism and the possession, is still there's a scientific reason for this. Even though he's seen some things that are really magical, he's no, there's a scientific. It's only until he's exhausted every other scientific option that he wants to go forward with the exorcism. He's not even the leader on it. And in the end, what gets the demon out of him is not the ancient Catholic rites, right? It's not that he said the right prayer at the right time and suddenly the demon was gone. It was it was a true New Testament stripped down message of, I will sacrifice myself for the sins of others.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say, get out of this girl and come into me, ruin me so she can live, and he doesn't even get a whole, I have found Jesus again moment,
Right.
Yeah. Christ sacrifice. And the whole subplot of him feeling that he has lost his faith is really this beautiful and poignant story that we follow alongside Reagan's. And we don't necessarily get a neatly tied up moment where he refines his faith. We see him, acknowledging the supernatural, but that's not the same thing. But the fact that he arrives at a Christ-like sacrifice is a really powerful action for that character to take. where at least we're left with a legacy that we can feel, you know, there was something bigger than just chaos at work here. There was true love and sacrifice.
One thing I definitely noticed this viewing, especially since I already knew the ending, is that like when Karis first shows up and first meets the possessed Regan, the demon actually says, "Bring on the exorcism." He's like, "Because that'll get you out of the girl." No, that'll get me with you.
Yeah.
The demon it predicted the very ending right there.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
I don't know if I think the demon kind of thought that it would just kind of continue to live on in Karis. I don't think it knew that Karis would be willing to sacrifice himself like that.
Yeah. And what I liked about that too, you know, you all mentioned that there is no moment where Karis's faith is restored. In fact, when he offers himself up as sacrifice, he's angry. He's lost it. He's at this moment now where he is punching a 12-year-old girl.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things. I dig that about this movie, because it's not almost like this entire, his rationalization for doing this was in a moment of not of a moment of clarity, but of a moment of anger.
Yeah.
And taking that and then realizing what he has to do to get rid of the demon and then making that sacrifice. Yeah. I really like that, because the flawed aspect of this character. Jason Miller is so good in this movie.
Yeah. I believe he was nominated for supporting actor for this one.
Yeah. I'm waiting for that moment where he finds God and he channels it and he banishes the demon. And then after the chaos, he's sitting with the family and he goes back to the church with a smile, you know, and it'd be really easy to end the movie that way. And it would still be a great movie. But like the fact that I did not see that ending coming at all, you know, like I completely misread this. And I'm like, that was really refreshing to me. And like, you know, all in all, man, that didn't see it coming and thought it was phenomenal. When he dies, I'm just sitting here like, what did I just witness? And I had to like think about what that ending meant, because it was so not what I would have thought the movie would have ended.
Yeah.
And the following scene, when they're leaving the house in Georgetown, and Regan sees Father Gwyn, and he says goodbye to her, and she sees the collar, and she kisses him on the cheek, because that's what she'll remember. She remembers none of this, but she remembers that it was a priest who saved her from whatever it was. And I love that. It's a great moment. It's very quick, but it's so good.
Yeah.
So I think it's also important, if we're talking about the depth and development of the priest characters, to talk about the queer subtext too, which I didn't recall being, you know, as clear as I read it this second time through. And I'm surprised that like the movie wasn't picketed more for it. But there certainly is a reading of this film where there is at the very least an unrequited love, if not, you know, a real intimate partnership between the two young priests. There's a really intimate moment when Father Dyer removes the shoes from Father Karis as he is drunk and falling asleep. And he says something in the doorway that's like, this feeling is a sin or so. And it's like, is he talking about, you know, the reaction to his mother's situation, or is he referring to something else? The moment when Chris gives him the medallion that Father Karis had left behind is really deeply poignant and touching, and I think suggests a really powerful relationship between the two of them. So I certainly picked up a lot of that this time through that I hadn't before as a kid, and I think was really kind of brave for that movie to.
Well, it's also slightly problematic, though, considering that the actor who played Father Dyer was an actual priest at a Boston school, Catholic school. And he had some allegations.
There it is.
He had some allegations against him that unfortunately the statute of limitation had
lapsed.
I did not know that, but like this is my super surprised face.
Come to beautiful Boston. We've got pedophile priests.
Lapsed
Catholic guys.
Listen, I don't think that's exclusive to Boston.
Yeah.
No, no, it is definitely not. But
They make a
hey,
movie
we
about
got Spotlight out of it. We got the
Yeah.
movie Spotlight out of it. Yeah, there's so much here. Now we brought up, Mike, you brought up that Jason Miller was nominated for an Oscar. So was Linda Blair.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a big controversy after people realized she doesn't provide the voice of the possessed Regan.
Yeah.
That is Mercedes McCambridge, who apparently lived on a diet of cigarettes and liquor to get that voice.
Yeah.
And it probably cost her the Oscar for this. I gotta look to actually see who she lost against.
I mean,
But
Linda Blair was great, but honestly, if I were going to nominate any actress in this one, it'd probably be Ellen Burstyn.
she was nominated also.
Yeah.
Yeah, her just completely losing it when like they keep trying to tell her what's not wrong and what is wrong. It's just her like just tell me what I should do to save my daughter.
Yeah.
It's
amazing.
I completely agree. It is rare when you get a horror movie where it's just like every performance is amazing.
Yeah.
Like,
it is.
It's just not a genre that's known. And certainly there's plenty of examples of horror movies with great acting out there. So I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but it's rare where you get one where top to bottom, like everyone in the cast, you're just like, I got nothing to say, man. That was just a beautiful performance.
Well, and this is really one of the movies, if not the movie, that opened the door for real prestige horror in the the late 70s and 80s and so on. Like we wouldn't have The Shining to the level that we do without it. And
Right.
like many more films came after that owe their legitimacy to The Exorcist.
Absolutely. I mean, The Omen, which we reviewed last week, same thing.
Yeah.
The Omen doesn't happen if The Exorcist doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So looking at the Oscar nominees here, this movie was clearly the runner-up. So it lost to The Sting.
Oh, okay.
The only other movie that might have stood a chance would have been American Graffiti.
Oh.
Okay.
In terms of actress, okay, so Glenda Jackson won. Ellen Burstyn was nominated. I think Ellen Burstyn wins the next year. For Ellis Doesn't Live Here Anymore. Supporting actress. Okay, so Linda Blair was nominated. Tatum O'Neal won the award.
Oh.
Also, there are two kids up for supporting actress that year.
Mhm.
I have no idea who that is.
All right, Tatum O'Neal, Paper Moon.
Yeah, she was 12, 11 or 12 when she
11
won.
or 12, yeah.
I believe did she get beaten as the youngest supporting actress win?
I think Anna Paquin beat her, yeah.
Okay.
But but again, it's odd, first of all, because you think the kids would cancel each other out, and the fact that Madeline Kahn was also nominated for Paper Moon. There was a lot of stuff going on there. But The Exorcist in and of itself, I think took home 3 Oscars and again, it's the pinnacle of 70s filmmaking. Part of the reason why I want to talk about the 70s is because I really feel like you have such a unique array of horror movies. We've discussed 4 very different movies in this month. We did our slasher. We did our scary our scary animal. We've done the devil. Now we've done Mesopotamian demons.
Yeah.
And these are all but the way that they're shot, and I wanted to do Suspiria. Mike has a problem with the Dario Argento bright red blood.
Lice and Dice, yeah.
Yeah.
I got little things with the blood thing.
Yeah.
I'm sure
I watched it on my own.
You handled the Spinal Tap really well in The Exorcist.
Oh,
my God,
yeah, that part I was like, all right, I know it's coming.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring that up actually because we talked about, Derek, you brought up the whole juxtaposition of like the church and science and church and science. And I found it interesting that some of the scariest noises in this movie, the sound editing in this, stemmed from the machines that they used on Regan and how terrifying that must have been. They put her through hell before the possession even kind of like manifested itself.
Yep.
Modern medicine as a horror as palpable.
Yeah.
potent as demonic possession.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I completely and totally agree. And it's so synthetic and uncaring, right? There's no semblance of love. There's no bedside manner. There's no like gentle nurse to make it feel a little better. It's just, we're plugging you into the machine and it's going to go and it's going to tell us what to do. All the doctors and the mom are there in another room watching her, like, so she feels so isolated and alone, surrounded by, machines just twirling, poking and prodding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah. And it's interesting that she was just being tortured before she was literally being pulled apart. 70s horror to me is its own thing and has its own look and style, and that's the reason why I keep coming back to 70s horror again and again. Yeah.
Well said.
Now keep in mind, there's a lot of trash out there too in the 70s.
Yeah, sure.
But the 70s was such a deeply cynical time for America. It was a time where people felt very high sense of pessimism about the country, a time of rampant inflation, political corruption. Sounds kind of familiar, like to what we're going through, like political corruption, unjust wars being waged. People felt low. And that's like and at the same time, you have a studio system breaking down and directors being able to get away with whatever they want, sometimes even abuse, right? Mm-hmm. It's just a really good recipe for the horror genre, which is always, the horror genre has a bit of a cynical look at the human nature, and has a cynical look about what it means to be alive in the universe. So it's like a really good recipe to produce some of these phenomenal horror movies.
Well, and that manifests in The Exorcist too, right? So the film that Chris is shooting is about a campus protest, and she calls it the Disney version of a Ho Chi Minh story. So there's this cynical take on the protesting atmosphere and the anti-Vietnam sort of atmosphere. And then there is this conflict around all of our modern institutions failing us, either being corrupt or disinterested or manipulative in some way. So there's this desire to retreat to this older, more superstitious form of healing, because the society that we have built up with these inadequate institutions has allowed for a demon to enter a 12-year-old girl. So this very social aspect to it. And then, of course, you can read a lot of things allegorically, like the Reagan's possession happening at a time in a young girl's life when personality changes do happen, and burgeoning sexuality, and especially feminine sexuality and puberty is often a source of monstrous horror within literature, fairy tales, movies, so on and so forth. So there is this, deeply subconscious level on which you can read this as a reaction against institutions, but also, social development.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all I can say is, with the maverick nature of 70s filmmaking, I just thank God film Twitter didn't exist in the 70s, or else I would have killed myself. I would have absolutely killed myself.
Should it exist now?
Another thing I've noticed
last weekend was rough.
Sorry, what is Twitter? I'm not familiar.
One thing I did notice, especially like with The Omen last week, The Exorcist here, even going back to Jaws, is that the music, like the score of these 70s horror movies, they know when to use music, but they also know when to use silence. There are long stretches where there's no music at all.
Yep.
In all of those movies. And so when you do have the sudden, like the sting and the music coming in, it makes it much more noticeable, as opposed to something like, say, Star Wars, where I love the score, but throughout the whole thing, there's something to be said about having those moments of silence to appreciate the moments of noise.
Right. And I think that, with The Omen, I don't remember, other than Tubular Bells, I don't remember there being an underscore.
Yeah.
It was that? Oh, sorry, I said The Omen. I meant The Exorcist. Yeah. But even with The Omen, it was Avi Sante.
Yeah.
Like throughout. But yeah, no, you're right. Those moments of silence, let the movie set the emotion for you, not the music. And I will be the first person to say how much I live and breathe Star Wars, but
Yeah,
and
like
all my lightsabers. But
I especially noticed it right in the opening like Middle East scene where you got Marin like walking through the market, you got noises, you got everyone talking, you got noise all over the place, and suddenly it quick cuts to him in the study, and all you heard is the clock ticking.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
It was like just noise and then ooh.
Yeah, and it works well too with how well they let scenes breathe, right?
Yeah.
How well they're not rushing to get to the next scene.
Hmm.
You know, it's going to like whether the scene has a lot of movement, like they're in the kitchen and the cook's making breakfast, and so there's all of this like movement. There's a lot of energy, but you're just hearing the sounds of them doing it. You know, and so it's like it allows the tension to build, and it's like the temperature gets turned up so slowly in this
Or
movie.
turned down.
Yeah, we're down.
Yeah.
Refrigerated. Yeah.
So slowly as it builds and builds and builds. And even though like I know for a fact it's going to lead to a demon possession, I'm like tricking myself to be like, maybe she is just sick. You know? Maybe,
Yeah.
like the way it's doing that story, I'm like finding myself going with this journey with these characters. Which is like a lot of modern horror is like really like, let's get to the point, let's get to the monster, and then have the monster or the demon or whatever it is, the slasher. I think of this movie's made today. They show the scene where Regan throws Burke out the window, right? You know, but in this one, we don't see it. We just hear about the guy dying, you know? And so, but we get a really like a few long scenes with the investigator. So you feel like you know this investigator character who's really clever. And I'm like, oh, they found a way to put this like Sherlock Holmesian character into it. Another institution, the police force, you know, like in there. And it's juxtaposed to the priest and they have this verbal banter, you know, and like, so it really allows these scenes to marinate and mature before it gets to the next one.
Well, and what you said about, you know, constantly looking for the scientific or rational explanation, even as things get increasingly unhinged and harder to deny. There's an interesting, you know, debate that happened between the director and the author of the book, who in the book constructed this such that everything that happened to Regan, every symptom that she displayed or everything that happened to her could conceivably have had a scientific explanation or a medical explanation. Like it stretched the boundaries of it significantly, but that was important to him that there still be this level of ambiguity. And so he was really unhappy with things like the head spinning around 360 degrees because that, you know, it seemed impossible. And to him, supernatural doesn't need to be impossible. So the movie really stretched the limits of what was conceivable to think could have a medical explanation, to the point where it was just like, nope, we're throwing it out. This is absolutely, there's no ambiguity here. This is demon possession. And there's no other way to look at it. But
Interesting. I did not know.
Yeah. That I didn't know that either. That's very interesting. It's made me want to read the book.
Yeah.
Which I've never read before, but.
And Derek, you mentioned Lee Cobb as Detective Kinderman.
Yeah.
I actually really liked him because they, you know, in so many horror movies like this, you got the cop that's just like, oh, I'm gonna get the answer, and he's just like completely wrong. And here he's actually he's using like some veiled threats, but he's genuinely seems to be a nice guy. He's like, you know, he's doing that banter. It's like, you want to go see a movie? I'll go see Othello with
and he like fangirls over Chris too.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
He's really vulnerable and kind of sweet, and he's also pretty good at his job. Like he's really getting close to things.
And I mean, that's the kind of thing too, where in a lesser film, he would have been immediately killed off. The second he gets into the bedroom, you know, something goes flying through him.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, so
I
it
agree.
was. So Ed, all right. So speaking of our good friend the detective, we need to talk about the sequels before we wrap this up. All right. Have either of you seen The Exorcist II: The Heretic?
So
No.
I didn't even see The Exorcist, so I certainly have not
All
seen
right.
the sequels.
All right.
Never
Well, I
watched-
didn't know if Micah or Laurel has seen them.
Yeah.
What kills me is I started watching The Heretic just because I'm like, all right, fuck it, I might as well. It's directed by John Borman, who is typically a good director. Yes, he directed Excalibur.
Excalibur,
Yeah.
It is genuinely terrible. It's there's no, it's directionless. Richard Burton is in it, and it's like, you know, they had this whole the whole explanation in the original movie about how it's still, you know, they keep the exorcisms under wraps and all that. And Richard Burton is essentially this guy who goes around performing exorcisms all over the world. Yep, big secret. I haven't gotten that far into it, but Lee J. Cobb's character does come back, even though Lee J. Cobb was dead at this point, for The Exorcist 3. He's now played by George C. Scott.
Oh, great.
I've actually heard out of all the sequels, the third one is the only one that's marginally okay.
The third one, from what I have seen, there's a cult for Exorcist 2. I'm not part of it, but it's there.
No surprise.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the kind of thing I'm amazed people aren't trying to like make happen as a thing. But with The Exorcist 3, what I've been seeing a lot of is that there is one ingenious kill in the entire movie, and it's genuinely terrifying. There is a scene where, and I'll just kind of, because you can view this anywhere, there's this hospital scene where you see this nurse just walk down the hall. She goes into a room. They give it a moment. They just leave the camera on the hall. She comes back. She's essentially exiting to the right. And then you just see this like cloaked figure with what, I mean, to me looked like gardening shears, just walking much faster behind her. And then they just cut to this statue, this headless statue with like red across the neck.
Oh.
It's a very ingenious shot.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's enough to make me want to watch the movie.
I believe Jason Miller does come back as Karras in the third one.
Yeah, he does. I watched it once.
Like as a Force ghost?
No, he didn't actually die.
He was only mostly dead.
They lost his memory and was kind of institutionalized for 15 years.
Yeah, sure, okay. Just like Ian Malcolm in the Lost World book.
Yeah.
Mostly dead. Which is partly alive.
I feel fine.
Two blades.
That's up.
So, any parting thoughts you want to leave on The Exorcist before we thank our wonderful guests and ask them to show their wares for us?
Yeah, thank you for inviting us to do this, because I would have gone on thinking I had seen this marvelous movie when I had it. So thank you very much. I am really happy. Top tier horror movie for me. So just really, and just appreciate the thought, the love, the invite, and I have now seen The Exorcist for real. So that is awesome.
Actually, since you enjoyed the scene where they actually gave the medal to Father Dyer, do not watch the director's cut, because apparently in the director's cut he gives the medal back.
I did read that. Yeah.
Which
I don't remember that, but then again, it's been at least 15 years since I've seen that cut.
I get it, but it seems like an odd choice.
Yeah.
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 No, you keep this token of your hardships.
I want you to remember.
Don't forget how you sinned in the name of God. Now I'm off to go play some more sassy gay piano bar stuff.
Yeah.
That was an odd entry in that scene where he's like at the piano. It's like, hey, let's play these show tunes.
We got a bunch of actors, and then we got this priest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that totally made sense for me as a theater kid. I was like, yeah, this happened. This happened all the time. Whenever we went to people's houses, somebody had a piano and somebody was like, "Who wants to sing Alanis Morissette?"
And somebody had a priest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I've been to more cast parties where somebody is like, "Hey, I have a guitar. Oh fuck, I'm leaving."
Yeah.
So anyway, as I dim my mic because my cat is hissing, Derek and Laurel, tell us all about your stuff.
Yeah. So when we are not doing our day jobs or taking care of our sometimes demonically possessed almost 3-year-old, who woke us up this morning by singing a song in his crib in a demon voice. Like he was doing the Finger Family song, which goes, mommy finger, where are you? And then he goes, here I am. Freaking Danny in The Shining. It was amazing.
Oh my God. That reminds me of when my son was like 5 or 6 years old, and we were in bed, and my wife and I both woke up and looked at him, and he's wearing a Spider-Man mask, like it's a gimp mask, just staring at us. And it's one of those masks with the eye holes. And he's just staring at us.
Arthur's not here, Laurel.
Incredible. So when we're not living that life, we are producing way too many podcasts for the amount of free time that we have. So us from the Midnight Myth, which is a show where we discuss pop culture, movies, TV, and literature, and how mythology, philosophy, and history bubble up into our popular storytelling. So that is the main place that you'll find us. You will find Derek co-hosting the Wheel of Kaa with Steve. Do you want to tell everybody about Wheel of Kaa?
Yes, I'm a huge Stephen King Dark Tower fan, and so I read Stephen King books, including The Dark Tower, through the lens of how they relate to and connect to Stephen King's The Dark Tower. So if you are a Dark Tower fan, or if you want to get on what's called the Path of the Beam and read The Dark Tower, go along with us. We're going to be recording an episode on Stephen King's Misery very soon.
That's
Nice.
Ever.
Nice.
And then you can also find me on Sleep and Sorcery, which is my sleep story and meditation podcast, where all my original stories are inspired by folklore, fantasy, and mythology. I actually recently put out an episode inspired by Mesopotamian mythology. So if Pazuzu interested you, you can find me over there talking about the goddess Inanna. Fewer demons, less possession, no snake penises, I promise. And you can find any of those wherever podcasts are found. I also have a book coming out next year. So, if you hit us up on any of our socials or on midnightmyth.com, you can find more information about that.
I got it pre-ordered.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, I got to get it pre-ordered. I've been busy. I've been really busy.
Yeah.
We've got time.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so awesome to have you guys here, especially because every time we have you on here, I learn a lot. I did not realize how deep this rabbit hole went.
Yeah.
In terms of Pazuzu, and I appreciate you not only telling us that, but kind of giving us that light side, dark side balance on that as well. So, anyway, let's dumb the room down a little bit. Mike and I host a little podcast called Geek Salad. You can check that out wherever you get your podcast, which is the same place you can get The Midnight Myth, The Wheel of Kaa, and Sleep and Sorcery. We are going to have an episode out this week, right?
Yes, it will be out before Halloween. I've spent the last week trying to find all the clips for it. So awesome. Where we discuss our favorite animated Halloween and animated horror.
We are on kind of we kind of truncated our recording schedule down a bit, as I have recently been super busy in my other job of being in theater. So I'm wrapping a show this weekend, and I'm moving to another show immediately after. In fact, last night I had 2 rehearsals in the same night.
Oh my God.
Fortunately, they were in the same building.
Oh,
Good.
So
yeah.
it was fine. I had my brush up for the show for Blood Relations, which is a great tale of Lizzie Borden.
Oh,
and are you familiar with that one, Laurel?
I'm not familiar with the show. I'm familiar with Lizzie, but
okay.
And there was a Lizzie musical that some friends of mine did a while back too.
Yeah, well, there's another one now called Lizzie, and it's a rock musical. Okay. This is Sharon Pollock. It's very, my wife said it was the kind of thing that she would have done in college.
Nice. Okay.
A lot of it's very actory. And then moving on from that to Something Rotten.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, I'm playing Nostradamus. I'm very excited.
Yeah.
That's great.
Very excited. But yeah, so we are putting out new stuff wherever you get your podcast. But again, you can subscribe here. What did you think? Let us know in the comments below. Leave a polite comment about what your thoughts are on The Exorcist. You can also check out all of our other 70s horror. Just go into our timeline. It's all there in our live timeline. And if you want to follow us, we are on the socials on Facebook at Geek Salad Podcast and on Twixter, Blue Sky, and Threads at Geek Salad Radio. So you can check us out there. Derek, Laurel, I, again, have so much fun when I'm talking to you guys. Thank you so much. Don't even mind we spend all this extra time here because I learned so much.
Yes.
Same
Thank
here.
you.
The
And
power.
eventually we'll take you up on coming on your show. It's just been insane. So,
Yeah. Thank you for having us. Really appreciate it.
oh, yeah, absolutely. So anyway, until next time, I'm Andy.
I'm Mike.
Go forth and be nerdful.